anybody out there who's watching figure out that God could anoint you and expose you to the space where you know he's sending you to. It doesn't mean you occupy the space immediately. Because I think, like, when I think about David, I think about him so much. And I don't know why, I feel like there's something about him that God has been trying to either drill in my head or something, but I've been studying him weirdly. But I keep on seeing him. And every time I think about him, I think, wow, you are stronger than all of us. This guy went to play the harp for a tormented king, knowing that this will be his palace. But he never told Saul, it's by the way, you stay tormented. My time is coming. He never said it.
I'm taking over.
Yeah, this is my time. It's my possessing, isn't it? It's madness. But God will expose you there. And I think sometimes, it's not in the Bible, but it's in Nyawira version, is that David walking into that palace, God was showing him, as a shepherd, for sure you don't know how the palace looks like. You don't know. You don't know how anything looks like. You don't know how people behave around the king. You don't know anything. Yeah. But God will expose you sometimes to those spaces where you're meant to be. Not for you to be in, but for you to see some things.
Hello and welcome back to the 360 Perspective podcast with me, Trisha. It is another Thursday, another exciting week. Not only because we have a new episode today, but because we have an event happening tomorrow where we'll be having our very first live podcast experience. If you've not seen the poster, please check it out. We are hoping that you will get to join us in this conversation. And today, I have, I think I'll call our most wanted guest on this podcast. And, we'll just be talking through, just unpacking part of the conversation that we'll be having at the live experience on redefining success and failure and just what her journey has been in that conversation. So ladies and gentlemen, surprise, surprise, help me welcome the one and only Nyawira.
Everybody should introduce me that way, Trisha. All these guys say, yeah, we're happy to have her. Yeah, we want this intro. Cut this part up.
Nyawira.
Thank you.
First of all, just introduce yourself because you are so many things. So, Sema Zinyota Sema, and then in case you leave out any, I will fill in the gaps. Okay. So my name is Nyawira Gachugi Moher. I am a believer. I am a wife. I speak for a living. And this is seen through different spaces. I'm in the media space at large. On KTN, I host a show on Sunday morning. I write. Is there anything else I do? No, there's so many things. I MC, I coach. Speaking is my career. Yeah,
that's
like
what I like to say.
Like all those good things.
Not yet.
Actually, not yet.
One day.
All of us know you as a pastor. At least from the wisdom of the knowledge of God that you carry. I think you spit. Y'all are not even ready. But anyway.
All pressure.
There's no pressure.
But thank you for having me.
It's such an honor to have you and just seeing the work that you do and you've been doing out there on Misunderstood and on your socials. I mean, amazing work.
Thank you.
And a whole lot of wisdom that we are hoping we will get to bring it out. And I feel like I need to have you again because I don't even think today's episode will be enough with what
my husband was telling me, like, I'm on a podcast tour. So as long as you call me, I'll be here. Because I told him, I'm going for a podcast. Nyawira, this is the 4th podcast. Young lady, what's the plan? But I mean, I love conversations. I think at the core of who I am is a good conversation, is a lover. So I am very honored. And I think if you call again, hakuna story situtaongea.
You will answer the call.
Yeah.
But karibu sana.
Thank you.
I think maybe I can begin by finding out.
Okay.
I think I've seen from your events and I've been trying to guess what's your favorite color, but then I'm like, no, I gotta ask her today.
Okay. It's definitely green.
Okay.
It's definitely green.
Just confirming.
But I don't like wearing green. I just like seeing it. Like seeing you in green has made me feel so calm. Yeah, I don't like wearing it, but I love seeing it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it like related to nature or it just so happens that green is one of those colors that you feel more inclined towards?
I wish I had a deep explanation. I just like seeing it. I don't know what it does for me. Like green is here, I'm happy.
Interesting. Okay, and your favorite meal?
Ugali and beef and greens. They make me extremely happy. I can eat it daily.
I like me. You're that simple.
Oh my
And
gosh,
then
completely.
When we look at you, we're like, hey, this one looks like a filet mignon kind of girl.
They don't come more basic than me.
Oh, like all those beef stroganoff and
beef stew. No. Ugali beef stew that has like nice thick gravy that has dania and hoho. Like I'm so cheap. I'm cheap.
Okay.
The things that make me happy are cheap.
It's good to know because let me tell you, outside people can judge you.
Completely.
They look at you and they're like, why this one? Invite him in.
Madness.
And my other question is, what is the one thing that really, 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 really annoys you?
In my adult life, I've begun to get very irritated by disrespect. I think it annoys me when it's given and it disappoints me when I give it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's based off on what feedback somebody else.
Yeah, like someone says, I thought you were very trashy. I was like, what? I didn't know I was doing that.
That's deep.
Yeah, like where did that come from? And then in that moment now is when I'd be like, wow, I like it really hurts me when it comes off the wrong way. Yeah. But I hate getting it. Like if anybody disrespects me, I'm very quick to tell you.
Yeah. You look like somebody who would call you.
Absolutely. That's a man. You don't have to be rude or I'll make fun of your rudeness. It's a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Bad psychology.
No, it's a good thing too. I think you point out things, but I think also I appreciate the fact that you also take time to reflect and acknowledge when you've had somebody else. Yes.
So
that it's not a one-way thing where it's something that you hate seeing in people, and then you're also not working on yourself in case that's
I think there's a red flag if you're the one who's always being kosewad. You can't always be the one who's being disappointed, being offended. There must be something you're giving. I'm from the school of thought that even toxicity, it's a contrarian truth, but I think toxicity comes to you a lot when you give off the energy that permits it to be there. Yeah, so maybe you're actually he's a toxic boss, he's a toxic boyfriend. Yeah. But what are you giving him to feed off? So that's my thinking a lot of. Yeah,
and that's true. That's true. All right. So Nyawira,
yes.
When we look at your life, we're like, hey, Nyawira has, all these things going on.
Yeah.
She's an MC. Next thing you're moderating and sitting with the who's who.
Yeah.
Next thing you have misunderstood and like all these hundreds of women attending the event. And your life really looks like, hey, it's all perfect and glimmering. Na sisi kama kawaida wananchi, we are wondering.
Denial is ungodly.
We are wondering. Speaking for somebody who's watching, have you ever gone through a season of failure? Because absolutely. I think where you are in life right now and what's been happening, the amazing things that God has been doing in your life. It gives off the image of, quote unquote, a perfect life. But I think sometimes what we never come out to speak a lot is the areas or seasons that we've gone through where life has never been perfect, and we had moments where we failed and we felt like there was no sense of direction in our lives, and we were literally at that place where you're like, hey God, you literally have to come. So tell us.
Absolutely.
In such a season.
First, I get very impressed when people think that my life is so put together. I think very vulnerable moment is over the last 3 days, one of the things I've been feeling is, what am I doing? Yeah. And it's such a strange thing because this morning I was posting on my feed and I was like, on my stories, and I was like, you're not feeling like what you're saying at all. But do I have moments where I failed? Absolutely. I failed many times. I fail daily. And I think the truth is I don't cry pretty. So I wouldn't post that. Of course I wouldn't. Can you imagine tears, mucus? What are we doing here? I'm just crying. What am I doing? But I also don't feel, I feel the urge to always fail and hide immediately it happens. So many of the failures I've encountered are, one is a lot to do with my mental space, is that I have failed in how I think of myself. I have failed in how I think people should treat me. I have failed in high levels of entitlement. I have failed in perceiving myself wrongly. I've failed in all these areas because in as much as it looks like I'm doing well in my head, that doesn't necessarily correspond with my reality. And I think the truth is to also tell somebody is that before failure becomes physical, it does start mental. You have a big problem if in your head you're failing, but outside you're winning, because you're going to sabotage it immediately. So my types of failure are very much what I think about myself in seasons where I'm very high and seasons when I'm very low. When I'm low, I feel like one of the biggest thoughts that comes to my mind is, this is where you belong. When I'm on a high, I think to myself, what is about to go wrong? So that's failure. That's how I perceive failure. And I can smell it. I can see it coming a mile away. Yeah. Wow. So that's how. So it's not, oh my gosh, I did something wild, or no, it's fully how I think, because I'm a firm believer that in the fact that sometimes if I didn't learn from something, then I failed already. Yeah. So like I was in a bad relationship. If I didn't learn anything from it, then I failed. Yeah, it was a waste of time. So if I learn from something, I've won. Yeah, so that's how I perceive failure and victory.
Okay. So have you had like a season? I believe all of us have gone through a season when like literally things were not working out. Oh. So that's one side of failure in terms of just your mindset. Yes. But then kuna ile failure yenye it's just like the ones where it's a million ways but like per second, you're just like way, yes, and then there's other thing way, and you're like, can it even ever get any better? Oh my god, Trisha. So many times. So I've shared this innumerably, but let me just share it. Is that one of the things I would consider having failed was when I used to think, and I mean, I say this every time, everywhere, so judge me in your free time, is I really struggled with the fact that I knew I was gifted in emceeing, for example. That's the one I usually feel the most tangible. But I wanted gigs to come my way. I really did. And for some strange reason, every door was just slamming in front of my eyes. Like, no, we don't want you. Or they just ghost you, which is even more painful. Yeah, but I think what happened is that one of the hardest things for me in that season was asking God, why would you gift me and then deny me opportunities? Queenie, what are we doing here? What type of God are you? And I think only now, and it's a beauty of hindsight, is that I know what God was allowing me to see then. I wasn't ready. Yeah. I'll say it like a broken record. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you're needed to do something. Yeah, you can speak, and I'm happy you can. You can moderate a crowd, I'm happy you can. You can podcast, and I'm happy you can. But it doesn't mean that it's time to do it. Now I understand it. So now God was grooming me, and I think it's not the beauty of grooming, it's the lessons you need to learn as you're being groomed, is that there'll be a time for it to happen, but you need to be okay with not being put at the forefront. Oof. Yeah, it's painful. By the way, it sounds so nice now when I'm saying it. Like, oh my God, actually, that's so wise. It's wise, but it's painful. And I think the wisdom of life is to know that pain doesn't mean denied. Yeah. It can hurt you so much. You start to ask yourself, I'm putting in so much effort, nothing is coming my way. When the right time is. Because the Bible says, like the sons of Issachar who understood the times and seasons. And I believe that us as believers, if we are not sensitive enough and if you don't walk in discernment, you can either step into a season too early or you can miss out a season entirely. Completely. Just because you are not walking in sensitivity and discernment to know, is this my season, So how would you know when the time is right for you to be launched? Yeah. I think nothing says Christian podcast more than the Sons of Issachar. Yes. But I think the easiest way is to say submit. And when people hear it, they think marriage, but I think it's submit to authority. I had begun doing my content on Misunderstood for I had done, I think, like maybe 12 episodes by the time I serve at church, at City Lighters Church, and I sat with my lead pastor and he said, you know what, Nyawira? No, actually the weekend prior to this conversation we had our ladies meeting at church and it was a relationship panel. And I was moderating the panel. And so so after we didn't speak, but on Tuesday when we were reviewing our church programs, he said, you know what, I think it's time for you to step up and just call people
Tell them to come and let them listen to you speaking. I high-fived him. I was like, you're crazy. You're crazy. I'm scrambling for views here on YouTube. You want me to call people to come?
Yeah.
But then I told myself, you know what? Let me try it. I tried it. I stepped out and I did it. So for me, how I discern is also to know that God doesn't speak to me in isolation. He may speak to people who he has given for me to be under.
Say that again.
And it could be, and unfortunately we don't like saying it, particularly as Christian wives, but even our spouses could be the voices that guide us into certain truths.
For those who have kids.
Exactly. Even children. Come on, now we're talking. Because I don't think God allows people to be around you so that you can give into them and they never give into you. So for me, I know my Pastor George was a big one for me, my husband as well. And then little pockets of affirmation that God gives you. He'll connect you with someone and you're like, why are we connected? How am I here with you? And that's an affirmation for me. So discernment for me is submission to authority given by God. Yeah, it's not easy also, but it's useless if you submit and you don't obey. Yeah.
Oof, that's, I mean, that's deep. That's very, very deep. All right. So I think that clears out the whole fact, because a lot of people get frustrated in that area of tension where you're gifted and God has called you, for this thing, and you've attempted multiple times, like literally backfiring, like major backfiring, but you're so certain that God has called you and God has anointed you. The only issue is what you mentioned about time. Exactly. Like, I believe that time is a revealer of so many things, and even in the Bible, a lot of people who God anointed, time was what it took. And I think whatever you said about grooming and preparation, that is an essential part of the journey or the road to success. There has to be the grooming, there has to be a change of heart. I mean, there's a lot of work that God has to do in you before now he presents to you the platform or the opportunity to now release you into your purpose or your calling, or whatever gifting he's given to you. Yeah.
And also I think it's just to also let anybody out there who's watching figure out that God could anoint you and expose you to the space where he's sending you to. It doesn't mean you occupy the space immediately. Because I think, like, when I think about David, I think about him so much. And I don't know why, I feel like there's something about him that God has been trying to either drill in my head or something, but I've been studying him weirdly. But I keep on seeing him. And every time I think about him, I think, wow, you are stronger than all of us. This guy went to play the harp for a tormented king, knowing that this will be his palace. But he never told Saul, it's by the way, you stay tormented. My time is coming. He never said it.
I'm taking over.
Yeah, this is my time. It's my possessing, isn't it? It's madness. But God will expose you there. And I think sometimes it's not in the Bible, but it's in Nyawira version. Is that David walking into that palace? God was showing him, as a shepherd, for sure you don't know how the palace looks like. You don't know how anything looks like. You don't know how people behave around the king. You don't know anything. But God will expose you to sometimes to those spaces where you're meant to be. Not for you to be in, but for you to see some things. And I think David is such a big lesson for all of us. And I think it's particularly for all of us as believers, is that God will anoint you and he won't silence the anointing. You'll be anointed, even publicly. We'll pour oil on you, shine, the whole family is screaming. But between your anointing and your kingship is such a long time of God working on you. That period was very important for David. And it didn't help him per se, because also our brother David, when the sisters were in the palace, he was still a brother and, he had his downfalls. But it's to tell you that even though God exposes you to those spaces, don't occupy until he says it's time.
Wow. That's very powerful. And when it was time, it really was
and
time.
We couldn't discuss
Everyone
it.
Backed
exactly.
Everyone backed his kingship.
But the blind side was that the women were backing him before the kingship. Saul killed 1,000, David killed tens of thousands. David would have easily have said, it's my time. Now, the women, I have the women. And it's always the women. It's always the women. But it's just to tell you, don't let the voices make you think it's time. Because people can be cheering you on, Trisha, and telling you, this is your time. Take it over. But what has God said? that must be louder than what the people are saying, because the people, that the same ones who are saying, hail Jesus, as he was dancing, they were throwing their clothes on the floor and palms so that he can walk in. But the same audience, and I don't know if it's the same audience, but a similar crowd was still saying, crucify him. People change their minds, but God doesn't.
Yeah.
So don't be obsessed with the people's voices. Oh my God, it's so blinding. It's so blinding, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's very powerful, to beyond just the voices around you, which definitely God can use to usher you into your season.
Yeah.
But I think always checking in back with God.
Absolutely.
To just confirm, are these voices truly from you? Is it in alignment with what you are telling me? Because for me, I personally strongly always believe that by the time I'm receiving a prophecy, it's more of a confirmation. God has already spoken it to me. Like my spirit has already picked up that there's a shift or something is happening. So by the time somebody else or other voices are coming to tell me, God has already begun stirring that up in my spirit. So by the time the voices are coming, it's more of a confirmation. Truly, this is the season, and I need to walk in alignment to it.
I love it.
Yeah. So Nyawira, tell us, where did misunderstood come from? I love why misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I know that people were wondering, but Nyawira is a whole wife.
Yeah.
So why?
Oh my gosh.
And not Mrs. Understood?
I think it's a wordplay first. Misunderstood means it's not understood, but when it's misunderstood, it's the person and her name is understood. Yeah, so it sounds like some, Greek translation. It's very basic English. But it started because one of the things I'm passionate about is giving understanding to different things and seasons, relationships, people, life happenings. I love giving understanding to them. Not because I understand them, but because I have either learnt, or I am being taught, or I have read, or I am exposed to a school of thought around it. And so that's what I share on the platform. Why not Mrs.? Because then there's nothing like Mrs. Understood. That's not English. So it'll stick with me like white on rice, for years to come. Yeah, that's why misunderstood. And it came alive. I was at a couch exactly like this with my brother Ben, and we were recording his podcast, and his then girlfriend, now wife, walked in and said, so when are you starting your own thing? And I was like, why would I start my own thing? I just want to do this thing with my friends. I like having a good conversation. Let's have a good time with Ben. And Shira said, yeah, why don't you start? So we came actually to the Java right here with my then boyfriend, now husband. And he said, what do you think? And I said, I don't know. Little did I know that I needed to know, because nikaanza kupangwa. Yeah. So we're doing this video on this day. We're doing this on this day.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how it evolved into something.
Interesting. And I think just from your story, I think it's just also shown how God uses other people
completely
to propel you.
Completely. Because someone more stubborn. Do you know someone more stubborn?
Even Saul had to be pulled out of.
That's me. Took us same. But I'm very stubborn, and sometimes now is when I begin to feel like, okay, I need to focus a little more when God is saying something. Just listen and obey. But
listen and obey. And do it. Don't wait for people to come in.
But it's easier to be done for that. So I think that's how it was birthed. But I'm a very stubborn person. God is working on me in that area.
Okay, interesting. And when it comes to like the media space, how did you get yourself in it? Because you've been in the media space for quite a long time. So is this something that you had a desire for? Like how you're a kid and asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Was it media for you always? Or is it something that God birthed in you over the years as you grew up?
No, it was actually never media. I think even now, to be honest, I think of media as a big tool. I don't think this is it. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I think growing up, what I've always known I wanted to be was president. Funniest thing ever. Wow. I wanted to be a runner. I wanted to be, I think after a few sessions of my therapist, she said, definitely it's a public scene. Now, I wish I knew this when I was younger. I'd have been so much further in my life. But regarding media, no. So what happened is that God always put me in spaces where it always was something I could do. As I said, I talk a lot. And now for a living, but I talk a lot. And so when I was at Kubamba, I remember being paired with the production team. And this was when Mose and Kambua were on air, and on Rauka and then Bambika. And so I would go for their meetings and I'd serve there. And sometimes I'd even go for the shows on Citizen and see how they do it. Very interesting transition. Never quite thought it was a space I'd wanted to be in. But it used to be exciting to just see like so you're in, like, it's an interesting space. At Groove, it became the same thing, but not necessarily only in media, but now was also handling people who are in media, leading towards the awards. And then, I think after that season is when I felt maybe I should try this media space, and I got rejected, smack in my face, like, woo, slap that door. You're not done for this job, go home. And that was a very traumatic experience for me. And it was traumatic, but very funny, because I think 6 years later is when I joined KTN in mainstream media.
Interesting.
Because of a podcast I was on with my friend Ben. And that's how we both ended up on KTN.
Wow.
And they saw us, we went for a screen test. Our chemistry was very easy because we were already friends. So it wasn't hard to do. But then now giving that space a bit more life was a different ballgame altogether. So I think that was the evolution of media in my world. Now the media space is an interesting space because I genuinely think it's just a tool, and I don't know what's next. I don't know what God wants with it, but I do think there is something, and what I think is just show up to what you're needed to do. You don't have to have the plan. Yeah.
Wow. I'm really curious about that season that you went through. If you can dig if you can dig a bit more on that, just the whole rejection.
Yeah.
And the door being slammed on you in that space. Did you ever feel like, I'm done and dusted? I'm never going to attempt penetrating or getting through, this industry just because maybe I'm not fit?
Yeah, absolutely. Two things happened. One, I went knowing that I was the one for the job. Because I thought I was. I've been exposed to your space.
To all of us.
Yeah,
actually.
I was the one. Come on, I was the one for the job.
Yep. Because I know there's somebody who's applied for a job and you're like, this is my job.
This is my thing. Exactly. And I remember the rejection was even more painful because, and I really thank God for how it happened, because it really helped me. But I was rejected in silence because I'm the one who reached out and found out what happened. Like, did we get the role? You guys have gone quiet. And then I reached out and they said, in fact, we're going on in a different direction with somebody else. The next hour, I was seeing the promo on TV for them unveiling this new person. I have never cried so loudly, so dramatic. You know the one where you cry, like Nigerian movies where you cry, your hair, you're pulling your hair, you're rolling on, you won't even ball up to roll in. Just dramatic. But it was such a painful time, Trisha. And I remember that time when I got that communication, I remember telling myself, I will never apply again. I'll never do it. It wasn't for me. It's not my thing. I'm not called to do. I'm done with this madness. What happened that was so funny was when we went for the screen test at KTN, I was sure that it's going to happen again. I was sure I was not going to be communicated to. I was sure I'd not get the call back. I was sure. Because even at the screen test, the producers were so kind and they were like, oh my gosh, and shout out to Christine. She really gave me a lot of confidence. Was, you're doing well, just keep at it. But when week 1 of no feedback, I had been here before. I know what's going to happen. So when I got the call first from Ben, because they called Ben first. And they called Ben and told him, hey, you've gotten this gig. And Ben called me. So I was waiting for Ben to say, they want you, but they only want you for this amount of time. I was waiting for, because I think the thing rejection does to you is it makes you think that it'll never happen for you again, that you're not deserving of it again. And it really messed me up. Oh, completely. So even the first few months of work, I was always waiting for trying someone else also. I was waiting for it because it's a bad way of thinking, but it's what rejection does. It makes you think that you'll never be enough for an opportunity. Wow. And that's what happened. So I think now, 2.5 years later, I guess maybe not.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, were there any lessons, which I feel like you've hinted on some of them, that you picked off from that season of being rejected as a media personality?
Yeah. one, it's not time. It's not your time. It's just not your time. And I think it sounds like such a simple thing to say. I mean, it sounds like something I can wake up in the morning and write everywhere, but it's not yet your time. But your time will come. That's the lesson. It's not that it's not yet your time, but your time will come. I needed to learn a lot. And also unlearn a lot. That consideration is not finality. You are considered for a role. It doesn't mean it's yours. Yeah. And that in life, God allows people to also shine. It just wasn't your time. Yeah. It was the other lady's time. And I appreciate her because I see what that season did for her now. But if I also said yes at the time, maybe some of the things God has done for me since I'd have never done.
Wow. And I think that's very important to echo because, failure can... And I mean, there's usually still trauma from failure. As you said,
Sana.
There's a lot of trauma, especially when you've failed in a sense of now you've been rejected or, you've been turned down for something that you are very certain you are gifted in and you've been, called into. And I mean, sometimes we can react out of our trauma. But I think I love the fact that there were also lessons that you picked up from that season. And the fact that I think this whole idea of time, very, very critical. To know that even when you encounter a season of failure, it could just mean that it was never the right time.
It wasn't the right time.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that opportunities won't come again down the road. I think down the road, once again, in a matter of time, you'll be surprised that some of them will come so easily that literally, it's not like, as you said, you guys didn't go chasing around for the opportunity at KTN. It literally showed up.
Yeah. And we were dying of laughter. Like, guy, all that foolishness we were doing, half of the show we were laughing. I mean, it's about time. It's just about time. But also maybe just to let anybody in is that I think be cognizant of what you're doing even after you've been rejected. You can't sit in the pile of rejection. No, you can't. And I think that really helped because the community I had didn't allow me to stay in that sad space of that you didn't get the gig. Yeah, so don't sit in that place too long. You can cry, you can feel bad, you can feel hurt, you can feel disappointed, you can feel, but you can't put up a permanent house in that space of rejection. Because what happens is that you will never be able to come out of it. Rejection is such a comfortable place to be. Yeah, because you play the victim. And it's such a bad place because us, particularly as women, and it's something we have to say, is that playing the victim is such an easy out. Because we'll never put in effort again. Yeah, we'll always say, I'll try my best, but if I get rejected, it's fine. It happens. It doesn't happen. It's not something you should be wired to get used to. You shouldn't get used to being rejected. And I think as a believer, it's even a harder call is that if true alignment is how you're working with God, is that rejection is actually a part of the story. So it doesn't stop. You just continue going. So I think just to say, don't make a house there. Feel it and get out.
Yeah. Or I think for me, there's been, because I mean, I've been in the media space for a while. And I've also rather gone through, mine was, literally kwanza we'll talk about it someday, but I think yangu tu ilikuwa tizili out of nowhere.
Out.
Stopishwa kazi. No information, no nothing, no communication, just told don't show up.
What?
Absolutely zero explanation for it. There's no there was misconduct or you didn't do your job well.
Nothing.
Zero.
So even no closure.
By day, until today,
none.
Zero closure of whatever happened in that season.
Oh my
gosh.
I
think for me, I remember one of the things that I intentionally did in that season was, first of all, make peace with it is well. I've been rejected. Yes. Maybe I'm not good enough for them and I don't fit in that particular organization in this season. But I think having the confidence and being anchored in your identity of knowing, imagine if you're not good enough for them, you're good enough somewhere else.
Exactly.
And there's a different place, a different organization, a different platform that will appreciate what you bring to the table. And now taking time to regroup and asking yourself, okay, as much as there's no closure as to why I was rejected, how can I keep improving myself so that even if I was rejected there, there's somebody somewhere else or somebody else who will notice what I do, and I'll be able to use my skills in a place where I'm appreciated. So I think regrouping and just taking time to sharpen myself, exploring, okay, fine, kama hii station imenikata, what can I do? You know, and I think honestly that's how I started just doing content on YouTube.
See?
I was like, imagine TV, mainstream TV is not the only place where you can use your giftings and your talent. And I was like, sawa, TV amenikata, it's okay. You know, God will open other doors. At the end of the day, you're still skilled, you're still gifted, and it doesn't, rejection never takes that away from you.
Absolutely.
They can never take your giftings and your skills.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. So good. And I think maybe just to encourage anybody out there is that to tell you convention doesn't mean that's the only place God is. It doesn't mean, like, convention could have been, I'm skilled in media, I need to be on TV. That's conventional thinking. But remember, this is the same God who allowed for John the Baptist to be in the wilderness doing the same work that he needed the high priests to be doing, which was calling out sin. So God can put you in a wilderness where there will be no audience. And unfortunately, the audience will have to come to you without any opportunity of you telling them, come hear me in the desert. And then as you're doing all that, your breakthrough happens where you get to baptize the Savior of all mankind. So you can get so caught up with, I need to be in the temple because I am a Levite. I am meant to be a priest. It's in my lineage. I should be where my dad was. I should be the one there. I'm John the Baptist. My dad is like, I should be where the system makes me. Exactly. Do you know why? I'm a PK. I should be there. But God is saying, I want you to use your voice. There's no doubt about it. But not in a system that you think is easy. I'll make it very uncomfortable for you. Yet there you'll still do the job. So don't get caught up with not being in the temple. Even in the wilderness, God can still use you.
Preach.
And you look like a madman. I mean, you'll be growing your hair out. We didn't talk about that, John. Your hair will be growing out. You'll be eating strange things. And there's no problem with that. But remember also that this is what God told your folks you're going to become. So staying where God has stayed is that sometimes staying where God needs you is saying, I'm okay in the wilderness and I'll do what I need to do there. It may not give me the same reward and accolade and fame and comfort that the temple would, but it gets the job done. So what's the biggest monkey here? Is it to say I'm getting the job done, or is it to say I'm doing what needs to be done? I think that's
I love that because it circles back to being secure in your calling and identity and not a platform for opportunities. Because when you're grounded in your calling, the platform won't matter when you're doing it. You know, as long as at the end of the day, you know, I'm responding to the call of God and I'm walking in obedience to what God has called me to. Whether I'm doing it on Instagram, whether I'm doing it on TikTok, whether I'm doing it on YouTube, whether I'm doing it one-on-one. I don't even need just
where no one sees it. Exactly.
Where there's no audience, no one is applauding you. At the end of the day, it's coming back to, am I walking in obedience and following the call of God upon my life, regardless of the platforms and the opportunities and the salaries and the pay and the perks and, you know, all these other things that sometimes we attach them ideally now to success, because that's what we as a society call, you know, success, or, you know, you've been successful because we see the platforms and we see all these other things, but the people who are very, very successful,
unannounced,
unannounced. There's no drama, there's no
nothing,
applause, there's no, you know, zero outward evidence of what's happening in their lives. But every single day they walk in obedience.
Absolutely.
Upon the call of God in their
obedience lives. Is the X factor.
Nyawira.
Yes.
You've been in the media industry for some time now.
You
know, you mentioned when you're working for Groove and, you know, Kubamba and KTN. And I think it's been a space that you've been in for quite some time now. You know, and genuinely speaking, the media industry is never the most, even in sometimes in the Christian setups, it's never the most Christian space to be in. It's quite secular. Probably that's why, you know, when the Bible says Prince of the Air.
Exactly.
Because he literally occupies, you know, when we say it's going on air, literally you're fighting against. And I think that's why for me, even by the time I was being rejected on mainstream media, I was like, imagine there's a war, you know, because the enemy doesn't want Christians to occupy these spaces.
No.
You know, the enemy's agenda is propagated greatly in the media space, you know, and the entertainment industry. And so just by virtue of that, you know, it's such a secular environment to be in.
Yeah.
Have you navigated your walk with God, being grounded in your faith in such a secular environment?
So this may sound like a bit of privilege because I got saved very young. And I think when I got saved, one of the things I found very interesting was that I was very interested in having a relationship with God. Has that been tested? One too many times, because as you say, there will be opportunities that can make you feel like, am I doing the right thing here? But how have I stayed grounded? I intentionally, and I mean this like with no cap, is that I intentionally walk with God. Yeah. Like, I think the dilemma we get is that if you don't know who you are and you get exposed to a space that defines you quickly, then you become the space. So if I don't know who I am, and I get into a space that defines people quickly, I will become that space. So what happens is that you find yourself, you dress a certain way now. You speak a certain way, you hang out with a certain type of people only, because I never knew who I was. I know that God has great plans for me, and I'm happy that he does. But I think my biggest obligation is to seek him so that I know what those plans are. So I don't want to ever feel like publicity and people knowing you and people cheering you on is the definition of God has blessed me. I want to be so content in my relationship with God such that if today morning I woke up and I felt loved, then I'm blessed. It doesn't matter if anybody gives it to me or doesn't, because I think the thing the media does, and I mean this with all respect, is that it is such a wave. Yeah, you're hot now, you're not tomorrow. But that's not salvation. Yeah, he's such a stable God. He's not changing. We still call him, by definitions, Abraham called him. Those are too many years, you know, but he still responds. So the thing here is to say, if with the media space, I pray that this doesn't become a story of they cut this and say this when she's changed. But I pray and I really intentionally pursue God. Another thing is that no matter where I go or what I do, I serve in church. And serving in church is not conventional or rewarding. It's painful, it's time consuming, it is sacrificial, it is tiresome, it is unrewarding by men. Yeah, but serving at church keeps you grounded because it doesn't matter who you are, Trisha, that today you'll be speaking in some of the biggest platforms, but on Sunday morning, you report to your admin role at church. Where people are giving you their licenses and telling you are getting married, process it. And you look at them like, yeah, thanks. Still have a bit of jet lag, but I'll do it for you. You know what I mean? Because the work of God doesn't become easier when you become popular. In fact, it demands for you to do more because you're called to disciple. I can't disciple off a high horse. There's no way that can happen. And that's when grounding ends. When you start to think that people should honor you in certain offices and certain spaces, even in church, because of how far you've come. We forget so quickly that you came this far because of God. Means that there is Father in him. But there is so much stagnation without him. That keeps me very sober. I have nothing without the church and without God, completely. I got married. My husband and I met because of church. My husband and I, I met him at church, we got married at church. Many of the opportunities I have gotten are because of church. Now, isn't it foolish to change the formula? Absolutely. So keep it grounded. Yeah. Also, just to be very honest, you're not as big as you think you are. You are not. You are not. You are not. Trisha, we talk about Jesus, and I mean this with all respect. We never physically saw him. We never did. His disciples were so influential that today we know about Jesus because of them doing what they had to do. If the next generations do not hold your testament of Jesus, then you are not influential.
Say that again.
So it's not the numbers on Instagram. It's not the numbers on Instagram. And I mean this with all respect. And I'm not shading anybody who has big numbers. Is that you have big numbers on Instagram. You have big numbers, a big following. You have people love you. Trisha. Oh my God, we love you. We do. But it's of no consequence if this doesn't cause influential transformation, where they will see you and say, we want to know her God. We don't want to know her. Yeah. So that for me is a very sobering thing. Is that everybody who comes and says, oh my God, I want to spend time with you. I just want to know you. Me just want to know you. Oh, I will bore you to death because there is so little about me that can change your life. So little. Yeah. But the knowledge I have of God, if I can share that with you, then I'm doing the work of a disciple. And I think that's the homework for anyone out there. So serve in church. Watch our jokes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I think I'm ready to end the podcast because drops mic. I think that is such a powerful way of staying humble, because I think the more God elevates you, ideally the more humble you're supposed to be.
Exactly.
The higher you go, the lower you ought to be, because I mean, pride creeps in a very subtle way, and before you know it, even going to church,
it looks like a luxury. Yeah.
Church now becomes more of an option because now you're too busy, let alone serving. Just attending regular church becomes a challenge in itself. And I love the fact that you said that's one of the ways that keeps you grounded, because it also requires a whole lot of discipline and humility to still show up on a Sunday when you're so tired, you're so fatigued because you had all these other things going on for you, to still come back and take that lowly position of saying,
and serve.
I'm here to serve.
Exactly. And it's with people who think, and I think there's a beauty about serving in church is that you really get to learn people. And I think Christianity and ministry is people-centric. So the faster you learn them, the easier it'll be for you to live with them. Because I can't love a stone. We're called to love people. So if you're so caught up with only being loved, it's a red flag. Yeah. We penda watu surely. Yeah. Penda watu. Watch our jokes.
Yeah. And I feel like it answers part of the the last question that I was going to ask in terms of what advice would you give somebody who perhaps is in an environment where it's very secular and they don't know how to navigate or even stand out in their faith. They're really struggling being bold for Christ, and I think for you, I remember, I don't know, it's one of the misunderstood that you spoke about when you started out initially, how you never used to mention God. Or it's one of the podcasts. I'm not sure.
On this podcast, as I told you, I'm on a podcast too.
Yes, it's definitely either the Reconcile podcast or one of those podcasts where you were mentioning, when you started doing content for Misunderstood, God wasn't, a conversation that you'd keep bringing up, but other people would. So what advice would you give somebody who is in that space that you were in at one point and you're really they're really struggling to have their faith come out?
Well, to that person I'd say, light is useless in a lit room. It's very useless. If this room had like 1,000 bulbs and I come with my light, it's useless. And I think God has put you in a secular space because there's darkness and you need to be light. And the beauty about light is that when you shine in a certain place, people see themselves. They don't necessarily see you. They see the path they need to follow towards the light. And I think to anybody who's feeling like they're in a secular space and they don't know how to stand up for their faith, you may be slowing down so many of the things God wants you to do because you're scared of this light. Now, it isn't easy to do it because we also live in a world where I think the word God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, anointing, or anything spiritual is muted immediately because it's given to a certain type of person. But I've also come to see that the formula in our faith is very simple, is that Jesus says, if you lift me up, then I will draw men, not unto you, but unto myself. So what you are is just a carrier. Don't get it twisted. You're not the salvation. You're just a carrier. And I think you're doing yourself such a huge injustice by saying I'm scared. Because if you're scared, then you're just as good as one without light. Because no one lights a bulb and puts it under a table. Because it's of no use there. Put it out and proud. But also, I think it's very unfair to use Jesus to bless you. But then when he does, to deny other people the opportunity for him to bless them. Like, God, give me this opportunity. I want this job. I really want this job. Please give it to me. God gives it to you. Then he gives it to you. And then you, when you go there, instead of making it known that I got this job because God opened that door for me, you make it look like it's your skill set. It's your time. Yeah, but it's really God. So it's just to tell anybody out there, don't be ashamed of this gospel. Don't be. And it's to say it doesn't have to be that your caption on your post is like a few words typed in tongues or, like a weirdly like technical scripture. Is that when we see you, we know who you carry. Yeah, just don't fail to give him credit. I think when you're writing a good paper, if you don't do your references, it's illegitimate. Yeah, because we'll start to ask ourselves questions like, where did you get this information from? And I think I learned that late is that I was writing well, but I was not crediting well. Because I was crediting my thoughts to thinking, I can say this and then not. But people will find the references. Yeah, and they'll hear it. Unfortunately, they'll hear and say, that sounds like a psalm we know. Why isn't she saying it's just a psalm? So your fear is holding you back. And you don't have to be a pastor. I'm pastor? No, I'm not. We're not pastors. We're not pastors. But it's to say that God has given you something to say. Don't be afraid to say that it's him who gave it. Yeah. So I think that's my encouragement to anybody out there. Also, just to tell you, the world is always going to have secular spaces. Don't be afraid to go into them.
And I love, because Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ because it's power.
Exactly.
And I think many times we forget that the gospel of Christ, it's power. And it speaks for itself. And it draws, it draws in men, as you said, it draws in people. You don't have to use too many words. Just your action and living out your faith in simple ways, in action, because you don't have to preach. It draws men to God. And so, and you realize, I remember for me working in one of the spaces in the media field work, and I mean, it was too secular. And I remember just coming off, no, I'm not going to engage in that conversation because I'm a believer and all that. And before I knew it, there's another lady who's like, you're a believer. Even me, I go to church, And the next thing, we're like almost 4 or 5 of us. But it took one person to be bold enough to say, I can't engage in such activities or such conversations because of my belief or because of my faith, and before you know it, other people come off, you know, and you realize, oh, wow, okay, I never knew that this many. I thought I was the only one. So I think just understanding that there's so much power.
Absolutely. And I think maybe just to also give a huge disclaimer is that being around the unbeliever is okay, but there must be transformation. Yeah. I think we like to say, oh my God, Jesus hung out with the unbelievers. Jesus was around them. And he was. He was around them. But then I think recently at church we were learning about it, and I was like, I needed to read this story again. But Zacchaeus, Jesus comes to his house and Zacchaeus says to himself, I'm going to give back the money, I'm going to do right. There was conviction. And so I think the comfort is not to say I'm a believer and I'm around non-believers. It's to say I am a believer. And I believe that the space I'm going to be in should trigger a sense of change in people's lives. It shouldn't be conformity to you live your own path. Then I don't need to be near you. Yeah. So I think it's just also tell you, don't be comfortable saying I'm around where it's happening. Yeah. Be what's happening. Yeah.
Absolutely. Finally, I remember there's one question that was thrown into the conversation that we'll be having on Friday about redefining success and failure. Hope you guys are coming.
Better be there.
And it was about imposter syndrome.
Ooh.
How have you overcome imposter syndrome in your life and just being able to step out in faith to do all these things that we still doing as Nyawira? Because I know all of us, trust me, you even put in that event tomorrow. It's taken the Lord and a whole lot of pushing and conviction and Trisha, I am calling you to do this and you must obey. Literally just being a Jonah or being pulled back, while trying to run away. So how have you had to overcome imposter syndrome? What are some of the things that have helped you do that?
First, let me give you your flowers. I'm very proud of Trisha, and this is a courtesy call. If I cut this part up when we're done and tell people you better come, I think there's so much power in supporting when it's starting. So be part of this story. Don't be a joker. Come. In fact, let's scramble for the first front rows for no reason and cause controversy amongst the ushers. But make sure you come. Imposter syndrome is when you think you're not deserving of the platform, or I shouldn't be the one to do it. Isn't that what happens? Like, why me?
You really struggle with,
why is it me?
I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I'm not good enough and I'm not fit. Now, there are two sides to this coin. There is like the normal social side that says like that's like a fixed mindset that tells you I'm not good enough, someone else is better. And a growth mindset is saying, let me fail and I'll keep on learning. So that's how you kill imposter syndrome. Yeah.
I like that.
Let me fail. Let me do well.
Let me fail.
Let me fail and I'll keep on learning. Exactly. Yes. But then also the spiritual side of imposter syndrome is that imposter syndrome, I think in the kingdom of God, is pride. It has nothing to do with you. Paul says that it is only in him that we live, move, and have our being. So why are you not enough? You're doing his work. Yeah, the cleaner doesn't take ownership when the bills aren't paid. That's the owner's job. The cleaner's job is I'm cleaning and I'm going to do what I need to do at this level. So in God's kingdom, what I think we have been tasked to do is that we are workers. We're not owners. So imposter syndrome in the kingdom is saying, it's pride because it's saying I'm the reason this is happening. So I'm not enough. Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is like a pro max version of the enemy fighting you. One, he's telling you it's your gig. Two, he's telling you, but is it really yours? Three, he's telling you, can you really do it? Oh, yeah, like he comes at you, sure. But the truth is that imposter syndrome in the kingdom is, it needs to be removed by you saying, I'm surrendered to what God needs me to do. It has nothing to do. Trisha, if people come on Friday, because they will come. Yeah. Because they will come. And you better be coming. Yeah. If they come or if they don't come, you have no obligation apart from gathering them. You've done what you have to do. If they come, great. Because they'll come, great. If they get transformed, great. If they don't, great. That's none of your business. You only did what God told you to do. Bring us together. So imposter syndrome moves away from you when you stop thinking that it's about you. Get out of the way. And I think it's a gospel I'll be preaching a lot of. And I think even to myself more than anybody else is that this thing the world has packaged it as imposter syndrome because it makes us think that we run the show. But in the kingdom, we don't. Yeah, we don't.
Get out of the way.
Get out of your own way.
Your own way.
You're the one in the way.
Nope. It's not about you.
Get out. Yeah.
I love that. And just the fact that, because I think for me, that's one of the things that I've also been learning, that we are never in charge of the outcome.
No.
Ours is to obey, walk in obedience, do what God has called us to do. The outcome is upon God.
Yeah.
However way he'll bring out the outcome, our call is to be diligent. Our call is to be faithful to the things that God has called us to. Because at the end of the day, once you get to heaven to be more of, well done, good and faithful.
Exactly. Did you do what you needed to do?
The numbers. It's not, how many followers, how many people are watching your story. It was none, or how many people attended the gig or the event. Even if it was just that one audience.
Yeah, it should be enough. Exactly. Yes. And I think I watched an interview one time and it was Billy Graham, I think when he was just about to pass on. And they did this thing where I think it was the 100th birthday. No, just he died at 100. But I think they did a thing with him when he was older. And they were asking, one of the questions was, looking back at the journey, you've spoken to millions of people. And he said, that wasn't the goal. The goal was the fact that I spoke and God moved. And even if only one person got saved, I did my job. Now, this is a man. Billy Graham was not a small man. He was not a small man at all.
He commanded thousands.
Can you imagine? Yeah. And even in a time when race was an issue, he was still so faithful to preach Jesus. But Billy Graham's conviction was that only one. That's all he always wanted. Yeah. Just one.
About that one.
Just one. So I think sometimes we get so caught up with the volume, and we get lost because the goal is depth. Yeah. So we see Jai go deep.
What a way to land this conversation. You have a gig coming up.
Yes.
And I think before we wind up, I'd love you to mention about it. Invite Watu or 360 Perspective Podcast to make sure that you come for Nyawira's
event. So we're doing Misunderstood on the 22nd of June. It'll be a great time. Tickets are running off the shelf. They're flying. They're not even running. They're flying. So please grab your ticket. Follow me on Nyawira Gachugi. You'll find all the details there. We're going to be unpacking regret and with a great friend of mine, Janet Mbogwa. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how that conversation will be. So kuja tuongee vitu deep.
Please, you better get that ticket right now, because as you heard, chelewa utampata mwana si wako. So make sure you grab your ticket. But Nyawira, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. We'll be having you tomorrow in the panel. I know there's a lot more questions that we've had from people who've signed up for the event, and so we'll be unpacking that conversation more on redefining success and failure. So guys, definitely you want to be there tomorrow from 5 p.m. at International Christian Center, Nairobi or Nairobi West. That's where we'll be gathering from 5 p.m. going through the conversation of redefining success and failure. But for today, I really do hope that you have glimpsed a lot from today's conversation. From Nyawira sharing her journey of moments when she's failed, to just going through rejection in different places, and her coming out, the lessons that she's learned from it, and also more so just imposter syndrome. I think that was a good way to land today's conversation. So I really do hope there's something you've learned from today's conversation. Let us know in the chat comment section what are some of the things that you've learned from the conversation today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, make sure you come early, because we're going to have a great time together. See you then.